Okay. So I've got to say got it, presumably. Yeah. Okay. So shall I start share? Well, I'll just have a quick brief chat. Sketching has really been part of my life since, since I was about kind of 10 or 11. I was always really interested in drawing, and one of my kind of early memories was always running out of paper, and I used to draw on exercise inside novels where there was a kind of couple of pages before you get to the words. I just thought that was a bit of a waste of paper. Walls, anything. I remember as I was about 14, and I was at school, and someone just gave me a stack of paper from a photocopier, and I thought, wow, this will keep me going for a long time. So that was always the sort of the battle, and I always found drawing absolutely intoxicating in a way. It's this sort of world that you can just make for yourself, invent people, make streets, complete worlds out of nothing. And I find it incredibly absorbing. I mean, to this day, and it's apart from being my job, and it's also a massive form of therapy for me. I find that I can just relax and take myself away from the problems of the world, by drawing. And really, I think anyone drawing of any standard, it can have that role. So I'm just going to go through my sketchbooks now. Let's see how we do here. Okay. So this is a slide of some of my sketchbooks dating back to, this one says 1981 here. And I suppose this is back as a pre-digital age. And I think it'd be very hard to do now, because we've all got phones and phones, social media, and it's also distracting. But when I was growing up in the country, there was really very little to do. And so, the excitement I got from drawing was an amazing thing. And I suppose you'd struggle to get to do so many hours now with the pressure of phones, and we all spend way too long on our phones. So my earliest sketches were, all sorts of things, but I thought I'd focus on the architectural side. And they're really not good on any level. So these I did when I was about 11 or something like that. There was this book that my father had, which was Dégaudet, and I found those engravings incredibly beautiful, and I did my sort of level best to copy them. And there are some more ones. Another thing I did with my father and was going on sketching holidays, and we used to go to Italy and sit in a cafe and just sketch all day, which I really enjoyed. And I had a kind of little system going where I would draw in pencil, then I would ink it in, and then I would do some watercolor. I always did the watercolor fairly boldly, as if it was sort of poster paint. Not kind of, one for subtlety. Again, if you sort of look at these drawings, they're quite poor. But I think the advantage of starting young is that you're very excited about whatever you do, however bad it is. And so I suppose, that's in a way why it's difficult to do it. Start sketching later is to become too much of a perfectionist. And I think you should always, when you do draw, when you begin to sketch, is just imagine you're really good and just sort of believe that, even if you're not. and you will improve. So as you can see, these are getting slightly better as the years go by. We're probably about 1983. I must have been about 14 or something then. And I had this kind of illustrative style they had. And I suppose when I was about 16, 17, when we were sort of doing O-levels and A-levels, at that point, students were really still taught how to draw properly in a way that they're not nowadays. And that was really valued. And at school, we would have still lives like this one here set up. And we would sit and draw it, for hours on end. And it was a really fun experience, and you did learn to draw. And it's funny, there was a kind of moment, it must have been around about 16, when drawing just sort of clicked for me, and the kind of naivety of the early sketches was sort of gone. And I guess it's slightly embarrassing in a way that you get to a level about the age of 18, and then that is your level, and then you improve a small amount, but that is how good you'll become. This is a sketch of my brother-in-law. I think I was 17. And I mean, this is actually one sketchbook I did, I think when I was 16 or 17. And there's just all sorts of things in it. Like here's some crazy curtain design. It's a drawing of a dog. I drew stacks of hands, always been interested in drawing hands. And then there was things like sort of little bits of diary that I wrote, which I sort of illustrated. And then I did kind of humorous drawings like this, kind of weird invented instruments. And then this was a Rococo table that my parents have got in their sitting room. And then here, I don't know quite what that is, a sort of cartoon thing. I designed a wallpaper when I was about 18, a sort of neoclassical trompe-l'oeil wallpaper. And I decided to kind of write a little sort of sales brochure effectively for it. And I did this in a sketchbook. So I did all these pages of little notes about why I'd detailed it, how I had. That's what it sort of looked like. And it sort of came in pieces. And then you had sort of things like this decorative panel that you could add. Around the same time, perhaps a little later, I went on another family holiday to Venice. And you can see here that I was I wasn't using ink to sketch. I go straight in watercolor, and I was starting to be very interested in the sort of painterly effects. And at this time, I wasn't sure I wanted to be an architect anyway. My interest then was I wanted to be an artist. It's always been one of those things I sort of like to kind of flip between the two, but that was definitely my interest when I was sort of 18. This is a sketch of the Santa Maria del Salute, seen from the Gritty Palace. Quite a good tip if you enjoy sketching is to go to the Gritty and sit and have a cocktail on the terrace on the Grand Canal. And you can, if you're reasonably well dressed, you can sit there all day and sketch, and then just have the occasional whatever, Campari or coffee or whatever is your taste, for very little. And you're sitting in a really beautiful part of Venice with the San Salute just right on top of you, getting an absolute eyeful of that amazing Baroque church. So I can thoroughly recommend that. This is another, I don't know how to get rid of this thing here, I'm not sure I can. This is a sketch of St. Mark's Square. I suppose what I became interested, I mean, my watercolors were always quite muddy. I never tried to get them kind of clean. And I always actually really like rendering dirt on buildings, because very often dirt on a building is more significant than the shadows. And as you can see here, there's kind of brown dirt on the columns and arches and so on. And then when the building gets lighter, I've painted a kind of colder color, which is a shadow, which obviously reflects the sky. So it has a blue quality. And then there's the kind of yellow of the sunlight next to it. Here's some sort of a little back canal. I was quite interested in the sort of darkness you get from when you look into water, and all those kind of sharp contrasts you get with the intense sun of Venice. This view I painted a number of times, slightly like the kind of Monet thing of painting Rouen Cathedral hundreds of times. And different times of day, sometimes you get kind of blue light, other times it's sort of yellow, and Venice is obviously amazing for that. Also, being very interested in figure painting, I would sketch my father, who would be sketching with me, so he appears on lots of my sketches. Then I went to Cambridge to study architecture in about 88, I think it was. And one of our first exercises was to do some drawings of a local historic building. I got the Round Church, which is an amazing medieval building with a big Victorian, quite adapted in the Victorian times. And I drew lots of details of that, which is really fun. And then I used this sketchbook, which, I mean, I've got my sketchbooks here, actually. I can show them to you. I used this sketchbook to do lecture notes. So these are some notes about Vitruvius's theories of the origin of the Doric order, for example. I did those for quite a long time. Well, I soon abandoned it. It was quite time consuming. And this was another exercise we were given in our first year at Cambridge. Probably the best thing we did, actually. I was given the Capitoline Hill, the Palazzo del Conservatore by Michelangelo, to do a white card model, quite a small white card model of about a foot by 6 inches side, just one bay. And what was really interesting was it showed how the different layers of the facade work. There are kind of 3 layers. You've got the column, the plaster front, you've then got a frame, and then you've got the back wall. And then how all the moldings kind of interplay between those 3 surfaces. So you get this one that goes straight, that links up with the front of the plaster. You then get this one that goes backward and forwards. And it's a sort of very sculptural, joyful mix of the 3. The 3 surfaces. I suppose, I mean, my sketchbooks basically have anything in them. They, sometimes there's a lecture note, sometimes there's a shopping list, and sometimes you'll get a piece of architecture or a portrait of a friend or whatever it is. And this, I seem to remember, is part of a memorial sort of plaque in the Duomo in Florence. I just found this quite interesting, how a modillion turns into the top molding of a capital. Another piece of Michelangelo's work here, and again the same sort of back and forth of planes. And it's when you sketch, you're forced to go extra slow, so you really pick these things up. And I think that I almost feel sorry for, well, I have a camera now, obviously, with a phone, but at the time you'd see people just clicking away at pieces of architecture, but as if they were going to look at it later, but they weren't actually seeing it at the time. As I mentioned, there are like kind of notes and whatever, and then, a sketch in the middle. I'm sort of slightly divided whether a sketchbook should be a kind of beautiful object in itself, or whether it should be a kind of experimental collection of drawings. So this one here is some details of the San Giorgio del Maggiore, and I've done a kind of like a fake cutaway of how it was put together. And I've got kind of two very different drawing styles here. One, a kind of pseudo-Renaissance sort of ink drawing, and then this one, a kind of very highly rendered sort of Beaux-Arts pencil drawing. Another Michelangelo. This one probably did either late 80s or early 90s, again, while at Cambridge on a holiday. This is this little bracket here, which is wonderful. It's like it has this kind of tongue of stone that sort of sits on top of the bracket, highly sculptural, as you'd expect from Michelangelo. And again, if you taking the time to render it means you really look at it and notice things. Something I did notice here actually is that the depth of the jam is thicker than the head, and it's almost as if the doorway's been squashed by the weight of the stone above. A little kind of Michelangelo-esque quirk. This is a sort of cartouche which I drew out in Prague around the time that the Iron Curtain came down, which in a way is quite topical, I guess. I mean, obviously it was a sort of amazing time. And we were in Prague, and you didn't quite know what was going to happen, although fortunately everything was fine that time. Yeah, so this is a highly Rococo piece of ornament. I love Rococo and the way that it's so human, and they make sort of stone and plaster look like it's flesh. I mean, I sort of feel this cartouche is kind of sort of lolling into its space as if it's sort of relaxing, watching television or something. Yes, this one, I remember doing this very clearly. It's from the Paches, which is a Roman monument that was built by Augustus, I think after he conquered Spain and Gaul, and he declared peace as they did. And it's an incredibly beautiful monument. And this piece here with these kind of Ronceau work, I've been a big influence on my work. I've used it for countless ceilings and other forms of decoration. And it's probably the greatest piece of Ronceau ever carved. I imagine by Greek carvers. So I remember doing this, and I sat there for hours, and it was very cold at the time. I think it was December, on this marble floor. And actually this was later used for, because I was working with my father in university holidays, and he was doing 10 Downing Street at the time. And I did a panel that's still there, actually. It's in the pillared room in 10 Downing Street. And I did a version of this above the two doors either side. And you occasionally see it on the news, which is rather nice. Again in Rome. This is the same sketchbook, actually, and done in 1990. The Porta Pia by Michelangelo, and this is him at his most kind of massive and chunky. A late work, pretty strong meat. He wasn't really going for kind of beauty. I think he was going for, he was very much doing his own thing. And I think he had such a huge reputation. He could do what he liked, and everyone would say it was brilliant. It's an impressive thing, Porta-Pia. Partly the scale of it, it's just so massive. But also the kind of massiveness of the stone is pretty exciting as well. There's another one. I sort of, as you can see, I have lots of different techniques, sometimes ink, sometimes pencil. And then for something like this, which is so sculptural, it's nice to do it in pencil so you can get all the different tones that the shadows make. Again, another piece of Michelangelo here. That is the central door from the Capitoline Hill, the Senate, the central building there, with these sort of crazy forms of moldings, which he did, all these kind of different shapes. And sketching gives you a time to sort of sit and digest all of these. And here's some little sketches from San Carlo in Quattrofantane, the church by Borromini. And I was interested in this detail here, which is how the bases and the plinth moldings sort of meet. And I think these really great Baroque architects had a real facility for joining moldings together in a really interesting and unusual way. Something like that has never been done before or since. And that's one of the capitals, one of these capitals here as well. Borromini is an amazing architect. Everything he did was a one-off, an original. He never sort of repeated himself, or rarely anyway. Again, this is just in the same sketchbook, piece of sculpture, not a particularly good piece of sculpture, but I suppose that's the charm of a sketchbook. You just get all sorts of things cheek by jowl. I think it was after my first 3 years at Cambridge, I took a year off and I spent about 6 months in Rome, mainly sketching sculpture at the Borghese Gallery. But I also did a little bit of measuring, and this is the sketchbook that I had. And the main thing I measured was the Raimondi Chapel by Bernini, actually, this time it was. Quite amazing little chapel. It's got this window here that makes a piece of hidden light that lights up a bas relief at the back here, which is sort of very mysterious and must have looked uncanny before the days of electric light. And it's also an eastern window, so it's the sunrise, which is a sort of a metaphor of God, or has been for millennia. And it was they're obviously playing with that symbolism. And actually, I got shut in this church several times when I was measuring this. Well, once I was shut in it because the guy closing it didn't see me. And another time I was measuring and I heard a wedding begin, and there was organ music and everything. So I kind of hid in the chapel, and then I poked my head out at an opportune moment, and there was another wedding going on. By the time I got out, I think there had been about 3 weddings before I managed to make my escape. Always wonder whether those couples are still together. Yeah, this is a capital from that chapel. I've always been interested in these capitals. I use ionics like these, corner ionics, routinely, and they were the favorite ionic in English architecture, really from Christopher Wren through to the mid-18th century, up to Adam. And then there was a big revival of them in the Edwardian period. So it's very much the sort of English molding, but architects like Gibbs, Kent, Vanbrugh. This was their go-to Ionic. They never used the conventional Ionic that Palladio designed. So I'm also quite interested in these swags. They give it this kind of French look. Obviously, this was copied at Versailles and places like that. Little tomb by Bernini. Again, I suppose when you're measuring, you need to measure things that are reachable. The good thing about the Raimondi Chapel is that when I was measuring that, it was full of scaffolding, so I could get all the way up. But usually you can only measure things sort of up to about 6 foot off the ground. Yeah, and I did my dissertation on column base moldings because I'd measured so many of them. And it's quite interesting if you look at kind of Palladio's 4 books, the bases are really well measured and the capitals are very generic. He's just seen one, perhaps one that fell down, and measured that and then just sort of took it for all of them. Yeah, this was a tiny capital, really small. In fact, to give it scale, I put a 35mm film just to give it scale. I didn't really imagine there'd be a time when people didn't know what 35mm film was, but now there. Raphael's Villa Rotunda, amazing building, a base molding. What I like about this one, and I kind of alluded to Michelangelo, is how he has this pulvinating frieze at the bottom of the column, and it looks like the stone is made out of something squashy like nougat or clay, and it's kind of billowing out from the weight of the column. That is a slightly more detailed measured drawing of the Porta-Pia window, and I've done a little sketch of how all these pieces come together, these weird sort of shadow gaps that Michelangelo did, obviously way ahead of his time. This is a very similar window by Raphael, and it's slightly surprising that Raphael did a window like this, which is so sort of muscular. I think that Raphael, he always thinks, it's very kind of beautiful, refined, but he was a great copier and he copied everyone. There's the famous Michelangelo-esque figure in the School of Athens. He was a magpie. This is quite an interesting one. This is one of Borromini's balusters at San Giovanni in Laterano. And you can see there's this S-shaped space between them, which is great for a modern classical architect, because one of the big problems with balusters is that you're not allowed to have more than 100 mils sphere between any part, which makes your normal baluster impossible because this bit is always huge. But the great thing about these ones is that the space remains continuous throughout. I suppose the thing about sketchbooks is that they are very beautiful objects. And this was a sketchbook that a friend of mine very kindly made for me when I was living in Rome. And it's got this wonderful Chinese binding. And I think that is part of the joy, is what the covers look like, really. After Rome, I went to America to work with Alan Greenberg. I got fascinated by sort of wild animals in the Natural History Museum. And this is one of the elephants, hippos, various other storks, what have you. Yeah, I mean, I could talk for hours about these ones. Just very quickly, I went on a sketching trip with my parents to Syracuse, and me and my father very much fell in love with the cathedral at Syracuse. And we were supposed to go to Noto and various other Baroque cities, and we never did because we wanted to really settle down and measure this amazing cathedral. Slightly regret it now, actually, because I've never been back, but there you go. One day. This is a sketch of the front facade of Santa Maria del Pache. Always loved this church, the kind of very sculptural way that the front of the church has this kind of amphitheater behind it. And then there's little streets that go through. It's a really subtle, interesting building, particularly on this very dense Roman street that it sits on. Yeah, I've always drawn a lot of figures, sculptural figures, found them very useful just to get kind of develop a facility at drawing. This is Pluto and Persephone at the Villa Borghese, which I've drawn many times. Another Bernini figure, one of the Four Rivers, I can't remember which one it was, what is, from his sculpture in Piazza Navona. This is a drawing of Fatipur Sikri, which is a sort of little Indian palace. I went on a trip to India and I did a lot of drawing on that. And I suppose one thing that's quite nice about drawing rather than the photo is you can really interpret the sort of almost kind of emotional sort of feeling of the artist. You know, this was incredibly hot, and you can see by the kind of laziness of the line, I just want to kind of draw it as quickly as possible and then just find some shade or somewhere that's air conditioned. While at Cambridge, I did a lot of stage sets and posters for plays, and I was asked to do costumes, of which I know nothing. And it was quite weird in a way. I would do these sketches, which I would sort of thought were kind of rubbish, but then you get a costume designer who takes them pretty seriously and ends up making costumes based on just a few brushstrokes. They could probably do them without them, but anyway. Another way of looking at a sketchbook is that they're just a kind of working thing that you have in a studio, and the more kind of beaten up they are, the better, and they're about experimenting. So in a way, they're not meant to be something that's a thing of beauty that you kind of reminisce about, but they're just a working tool. It can be a little self-conscious, because I find that if I need to do a quick sketch, I'll just grab the back of an envelope. It seems a bit pedantic to get a sketchbook out, but there you go. So I, at the time, was doing lots of drawings of drapery, and I would do these compositions where I'd sort of sit and look at my picture and sort of analyze it in terms of light. And this was a knee. I was doing a bit of sculpture at the time, and I was doing a figure, and I was really looking at knees, which are fascinating things. I suppose, like most artists or architects, I just like kind of doodling, and this is a sort of familiar sight going back to Colchester from London, is sort of people asleep on the train. And that's something which you find in quite a lot of my sketchbooks. This is a very rapid portrait of Balzac that I drew in the Rodin Museum. Another thing is I think part of sketching is it makes you concentrate, makes you go slowly. And I often sketch paintings just so I really look at them, because you can just look at a painting for a few seconds and you feel you've done it. But if you actually sketch it out, then you sort of know it in a way that you wouldn't before, and sort of analyze the colors. So that is sort of going slow. I mean, likewise, this is a piece of Hellenistic drapery that I saw in the British Museum. And if you see something that catches your eye and you sketch it, and then you can really analyze why you think it's such a remarkable work. And this one I love because I love the way that you can see the drapery behind another piece of drapery, which seemed so advanced for the time it was done. Quite beautiful. I had a little art studio on a farm. So these are just some hay bales that I drew one day. As I mentioned, I often draw hands. This is Bernini's, it's a Bernini hand from, I think it's Neptune's left hand, which Bernini's Neptune is in the V&A, and I do a lot of sketching there. Again, sketching paintings, which is something I really enjoy. This piece of fabric I was sort of fascinated by. It seems so solid, and it was just enjoyable just spending time just really looking at that. I've done a lot of life drawing over the years, sometimes, you know, really detailed poses that take a long time. But what's almost more useful is doing really rapid sketches. I did this life drawing with a group of friends. We used to meet once a week. I think it was on a Friday, and we just we'd have a model, and we do a lot of rapid poses. And it's just really great to gain fluency as a draftsman. And sometimes you're just working in tone, other times in line. And then later, when I had children, I would draw them. And obviously children move the whole time. So you have to kind of capture the essence of a pose, even though by the time you're drawing it, they probably stopped being in that pose. I mean, this one is my son Alfie, and things like his hand in that position is the kind of thing that children and grown-ups do. They put their hand that isn't painting in a kind of slightly artistic pose, as if that's going to help balance them or something as they do their painting. It's my son Joey. You can see again his hand. It's got that very kind of distinctive way of being. He's always sucking his thumb. Something I did when the children were small is I did a little version of the Pied Piper of Hamelin. I sort of didn't really take it very far. I just did the illustrations, but actually kind of trying to get it published and all of that seemed too much effort. So I've got a sketchbook full of, it was a kind of different version of the Pied Piper of Hamelin that had a kind of happy ending. But to be honest, it wasn't a very good story because children don't like happy endings. They like a bit of torture. Yeah, and then I do kind of amusing little things like this, little jokes. Yeah, I used to write little songs that I play my children on the guitar. In fact, these are little guitar chords. So if you're a kind of entry-level guitarist, you can probably play that. And this is sort of like a nursery rhyme. I always loved book illustrations. I find them fascinating. And I suppose when the children are small, I was always looking at book illustrations and thinking, you know, I'd like to have a go at that. This is a sort of a modern take on that nursery rhyme. Again, this really expresses the heat of being in Rome in July. It's the Villa Rotunda, the Piazza Rotunda, and you've got the Pantheon behind. And again, you can really sense the heat and how you kind of don't want to sort of hang around too long. Likewise, this, you can see that the windows are just done with this kind of zigzag line, just quickly get it done. I suppose you also see the intense heat and how these kind of great big canyons, man-made canyons that cast shadows across. Quite exciting. This was, it's just in a sketchbook. It's a scheme I did for Hampton Court. I was asked, it was Allies and Morrison were struggling to get planning permission for their modernist building next to Hampton Court. So I did a scheme where I basically took their building, it was a very simple plan, it was a hotel, and I just wrapped it in classical architecture. So it looked like this, very simple, very pleasant. Funny enough, the developer put both mine and Allies and Morrison's one in for planning, and mine got planning, and Allies and Morrison's one didn't, which was quite nice in a way. After I got planning, well, I got it. It was a committee where mine got permission, and I didn't hear from them since, but I recently read that Allies and Morrison are still working on this, and they still haven't got permission. So they should have gone classical. I think it would have made their life easier. But anyway, another thing I've been involved with, working with my father, was down in college, the new theatre there. And this was a preliminary sketch. It's very exciting to see preliminary sketches like this actually become something real. And that's what it became. And there's a real joy to that. I also designed this, someone else painted it, but that was a real thrill to do. This was an oil painting, which was like a sample for these griffins on the ceiling that you can see here. This again is built. I tried to find a photo of it, but I couldn't find it in time. But that's a really fun thing to do. You draw something, and then a year later, 2 years later, there it is. I was lucky to go onto the scaffolding at Fitzwilliam College in Cambridge and really get down to the detail of how Victorian sculptors carved acanthus leaves. If there's sculpture up, it's always nice if you can to, if the scaffolding up, it's always nice to see if you can get on it and then really look at the detail. These are sketches I did in Venice, quite ominous date there, 10th of September 2001. This was a scheme that me and my father worked on for Chelsea Barracks. Chelsea Barracks was being designed by Richard Rogers, and quite a lot of the locals really hated it. And so they asked my father to do a scheme, and I helped him develop a scheme. And this was a sketch I did that got turned into a more detailed drawing. And Prince Charles got involved, and Rogers got sacked, and it all got quite extreme, really. And they've built something different there, which is certainly, I think, better than the Rogers scheme. There's another sketch I did of it. This is another capital I measured. This one's at St. Paul's. I suppose I was getting everything essential that I needed. And that was, it was a real education, just going there, measuring, noting things. What's quite amusing about this is obviously on the 13th of February, I went to the National Gallery and drew part of Rembrandt's Belshazzar's Feast. And then on the 19th, I was back in London and I did this capital. And I think that these two images have quite an interesting sort of relationship, because it's like the figures are kind of scared of the capital. It's a sort of quite amusing little accident there. I'm always looking at good egg and dart, and this is from St. Paul's Cathedral, some of the best egg and dart I've seen. What I really like about this is the deep soffit here between the dart area and the egg, because it creates lots of sort of dark shadows. You see Greek Revival or Victorian egg and dart, and they never make that soffit big enough, in my opinion. This is your kind of real sketch, I guess. I mean, you can see through there, you can see this is the last page was the egg and dart. This is a little street scene of Campo San Stefano in Venice. We went with the office. And I suppose what I like about sketching is that it's not just the building, which is important. It's the street signs, it's the lampposts, the people, the shrubbery, the lights, paving. And there is so much more to architecture than just proportion and building and capitals and so on. And I think sketching helps you see that. This is the San Savino Library in St. Mark's Square, done on the same trip, probably the same day, actually, I imagine. And I was quite interested in these. Well, San Savino was a sculptor like Michelangelo, and you can see how he's very much treating the facade as if it's a piece of sculpture. It's to do with how light falls on surface. Sometimes you have a sort of broken surface made by ornament where light dances around. Other times it's a flat, solid black shadow. Other times it's highlights. Other times it's flutes that give stripes. So in a way, you can see it's kind of like a piece of abstract sculpture. This is also the same trip, a little piece of Rococo ornament. Here's some more egg and dart. This is, yeah, I'm not so keen on Italian egg and dart, strangely enough. I think, but I can talk about that in greater detail if anyone's interested. But I find that, yeah, anyway, I'll leave that for another day. I've done a lot of Rococo work, and I sketch good examples. And I suppose sketching, you are forced to go slow. And I think what I was interested in here is how Rococo leaves have that extra little twist at the end, as if they've been blown by the wind. That piece of Rococo was from Newbridge House near Dublin, which has some amazing ceilings. I saw that while I was working on a house in Ireland, and which me and my father were doing. And what was amazing about this is me and my father would sit with the client and I'd sketch something and they say, oh, do more like this, more like that. And then, as I've said before, a couple of years later, what you've sketched is there, and it's terribly exciting, really. And I find sketching for clients a really useful way for them to get a really immediate view of what they're getting. I don't do much of, I'll tell you what, I'll CAD it out and then I'll send you the CAD drawings. I think they like to see it there and then. And then they dismiss it or they accept it before you've done too much work. Here's another of the same view. Sometimes sketches are kind of analytical. So this is St. Stephen's Walbrook, a Wren church. And it's difficult to draw, as these photos show. You don't capture the whole thing. So this was a way of understanding the whole space, how the dome fits on the various pendentives. Another Velasquez sketched from life. These last few are sort of presentation sketches I've done of things that I was excited by, and I just thought I'd like to record them in my own little sketchbook. And this was a sort of corridor based on some Adam plasterwork with something of kind of Raphael's loggias about it. And that was the dome at the end of the corridor. This was a composite capital with uncut leaves that I designed, and just shows the kind of details of how the volute meets the echinus, another capital. And this was a bit of ornamental ceiling that I designed. As I said, I've done lots of those. I really enjoy working with the Rococo form. More capitals, this fairly conventional composite capital. And then this is a Corinthian with uncut leaves. Another building which I worked on, started working on it when I was at university, I think in the late 80s, and then it went on hold for about a decade, and I returned to it when I was in the early 2000s. There's a commission my father got to do some villas around Regent's Park, and he made them all different. And this was the kind of Corinthian one, which is a very Baroque one. And it's when my father gave it this serpentine front, and it's the only building, I believe, in England that has a serpentine front, which was a nightmare to fix, I've been reliably told by the stonemason. And I got excited by the capitals because at the time we had a very good lecture course at Cambridge in our first year. And I read quite an interesting essay about how the first Corinthian capital was made. And there was the story is that there was a maiden who had lots of, who died prematurely. And then her friends and family, as a grave for her, put all her possessions in a basket, and they covered the basket with a stone. And then they just left it as a gravestone. And then over time, an acanthus leaf grew over the top. So I decided to do a capital based on that story. And we put that on there. So that's it. Just one last thing, just to say is, I wonder if I could stop sharing. Stop sharing. Just in summing up, I find that I don't actually use sketchbooks very much nowadays because I worry I'm going to lose them. I did lose a sketchbook quite recently, and I kind of wrote in the front, if anyone finds this, can you, there was a little page in the front that said, you know, if you find this, you'll get a reward. And I thought, I don't want to write a reward because I'll just get friends taking it and then claiming the reward. So instead, I just said satisfaction of doing the right thing. And I did leave this sketchbook on a train, and I thought, oh no, I've lost it. And then, strangely enough, I got it sent back by someone who just felt they needed to do the right thing. So there we go. That's me done.
Well, Francis, that was fantastic. I mean, a visual feast.
Okay,
taken up nearly the whole hour.
Did I? Sorry, I went on too long.
I mean, it could have gone on for a lot longer.
I could have done
every minute of it. But we have a few questions that were in the chat, so I'm going to read those out for you. Okay. Now. But I just want to say thank you for that. Just completely inspiring.
Thank you.
The first question was just, what sort of scale are your sketchbooks? Are they all?
Well, I've got them here actually. Can you see? So I've got little ones like that. Bigger ones there. Hang on. The biggest ones are kind of that size. Quite a few little ones. I'll tell you what. Hang on. Let's see if I can just. Yeah. Can you see them? Yeah. There we go.
Oh,
so
right.
there they all are, just lying there. So all sizes really. Yeah, I mean, it slightly depends whether you're doing something for memory or whether you want to do things for just to note it down. Yeah.
Very good. Another technical question. Would you recommend doing a watercolor wash first and then ink lines on top, or the other way around?
Interesting, because I don't do ink and watercolor now. I would say I would either do ink or watercolor. Although, yeah, I think I would. I think get yourself into, I mean, really, I think you should either work in tone or you should work in line. I always did the ink first and then the watercolor.
Excellent, very good. Another very technical question. Do you have a favorite pen for the really fine detailed drawings?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I can show you. Well, it's interesting because yeah, this is a technical question, and I will save people a lot of heartache. You be very careful of the paper you get, because you can get some very attractive sketchbooks, particularly sketchbooks that look like this, which have terrible paper in them. There's shops in Venice that sell these very beautiful sketchbooks, and they have paper like blotting paper in it, and you just can't do anything with it at all. But what I think you should do is get really fine cartridge paper if you want to use ink. And there's some sort of water-based shellac, and I can't remember what it is, which you can spread on the paper I shouldn't be giving away my secrets here, but it's quite, you can spread it on the paper and it gives you a really nice surface to work on. So the ink doesn't absorb into the paper at all. Hang on, I probably got, yeah, these ones here, that's how they were done. I'd paint them with this shellac or whatever it was. I think if you go to Cornwallisans and ask them, yeah, so that's how I did sort of these ones here. Yeah. Choice of paper, key.
That's a very good top tip. Thank you very much, Francis.
Don't worry about the cover.
Someone's asked, for a complete beginner, would you recommend some sort of course or just go for it and learn as you go along?
Yes, I think just go for it. Lots of really good YouTube videos you can use. Funnily enough, I restarted watercoloring about maybe 7 years ago, and I hadn't done it for a long time. And I just looked at lots of YouTube videos to just work out what colors I should be using, what I should be avoiding. So that's obviously useful. But I slightly think just do it and imagine you're better than you are. That's probably the key.
Yeah, because I thought it was wonderful to see your very early drawings. Very kind of brave of you to show stuff. I
yeah,
thought
pretty crap, aren't they, really?
Yeah. And I don't think you're quite right that you sort of plateau at 18 and you just make it, because you seem to have just improved over the years. So
that's
I think there's hope for all of us as we get older. I mean, I've got lots of books here. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Drawing, I mean, you find them in the old bookshops for like 2 or 3 quid. There's lots of them. I mean, this is just on my shelf right next to where I am at the moment, so it goes on. So and you do learn some little top tips.
Yeah, I mean, I always think with everything, whether it's a lecture, whether it's a YouTube, whatever, if you learn one thing, it's worth an hour lecture just for that one little thing you might pick up. So, but I think the real secret is just draw and draw and draw and draw and find your style. That's another thing.
Excellent. And then we got a very interesting question from Renee Killian Dawson, who's giving the next talk as it happens. She says, were you competitive when sketching with your father? I mean,
always, of course.
Who you can tell us who was better, do you think?
I can't comment. No, I think he was. I mean, he was, he's 30 years older than me. So he's had a lot more practice.
Very generous to say. Excellent. Well, has anyone else got any questions? You feel free to unmute yourselves and ask Francis now if you've got a burning question. If not, email us afterwards and we can put the questions to him and get back to you. But I think, Francis, that was an absolutely inspiring hour. I think we'll all enjoy watching it back because that's the largest number of slides we've seen in a single talk ever.
Yeah, I didn't think it would be that long, but
well, it could have gone on longer, and I think we'll all enjoy watching it back because it was an absolute treat. So thank you very much, Francis.
Yeah, and can I add something to Simon's comment?
Sure.
Francis, it was just also, I think Simon has already said it, but it was just so nice. Just the kind of informal honesty about just laying it out, because I kind of share so many of your things you've sketched. I've maybe sketched or measured, and I rather subscribe to your 18-year-old theory, because I think I probably got about as good then as ever. And then after that, it only depends how much you draw, and you've had the good luck of actually, or the right vision of life to carry on sketching. Whereas I haven't done nearly so much sketching, maybe a lot of measuring in a more kind of anal way and less sketching, but it's at least it doesn't go away, because then if you start sketching, it comes back.
Yeah, it's like riding a bicycle. Absolutely.
It is. So I think that is a very reassuring thing. But I just thought it's just really delightful, just the complete honesty was of doing that, because I'd be much more shy, of putting sketches up, because they either get good enough to get in a frame, I mean a couple behind me probably, or they're kind of hidden away somewhere and you're not actually going to ever show them to anyone. So I thought that was fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I suppose it is nice to see kind of good and bad. And also, the kind of story arc of starting a bit wobbly and then you get a little bit better and you plateau. I mean, there's those are the better ones. There are some shocking sketches from all periods of my life, which I'm not going to show, but yeah.
No, it was great.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks again. And then watch out on Instagram and our website for Rennie Gillian Dawson's talk on the 28th of April, which we're looking forward to very much. She's here tonight, so we'll welcome her next time. And thanks very much for all your attendance. It's been great to see so many of you, and hope to see more of you again next time. So thanks again.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you.